right. The first step is to create a nice clean template or pro forma, and we'll use the standard approach. We will use our column headings for our products or components in this case, and we will use the rows for the cost items that we find in the scenario. Now, I want to stress that this first step, all we're doing is reproducing everything that we find in the scenario, in that original costing, and just in the notes. We're not trying to do any math or solve any problems at this point. We're just creating a clean, easy to navigate starting place. This is called a pro forma or a template. Okay, so we're almost at the first step here. We've reproduced everything that we found. Notice I'm double spacing. This will help the marker, and it will also help me. If I make a mistake, I can go in and very easily insert something new. Okay, now let's get to the decision-making aspect of this question. We're going to have to get that total that's for 80,000 units down to a cost level or unit level. Okay, so for each product, we'll get the unit level cost, compare it to the outsource cost, and get the difference. Then we can get the easiest mark in the story, in the question, answering the question, advising if we should make the components in-house or outsource. You guys, so first step, as you see here, is to create a template or pro forma. Let's continue now, following the rule of easy marks first. Okay, we're not going to take this question from top to bottom. We're going to identify the shortest paragraphs in the notes, and we'll start there. So let's start with labor. If you see, they say labor is 100% variable, so we can just plug those numbers into our spreadsheet and get our first mark or half mark. Remember, easy marks first. Next thing we can do, come down here to the depreciation and insurance. Okay, and here all we need to do is remove the general overhead portion of this cost, which is 60% of the cost listed in the scenario. So we're just multiplying that original number by 0.4 or 40%. Now we have the product-specific depreciation and insurance costs. We've scooped more easy marks. Let's move on and go to the next hurdle. Let's tackle the material costs. And here we're dealing with some inflation. And the scenario tells us that the keypads don't begin inflation until halfway into the year. So we'll only inflate half of the activity level. 160 divided by 2, everybody, is 80, as you know. And for the screens, inflation begins immediately, so we will inflate 100% of the activity level there, okay, by 2%. Using the power of the spreadsheet, using the functions and the operators to do the work for us. Alrighty, at this point, we've cleared the easy marks. Let's move to the medium marks. And they tell us in the scenario that the heat and the power include a general apportionment of overheads based on labor. So we need to get that out of that cost so we can only deal with product-specific costs. I'm going to use the relative addressing so that I can now copy and paste this equation directly into the screens column. And I won't have to do much work except changing out that total cost for that item. Okay. Remember, keep your spreadsheet equations simple. The more complicated you make your equations, the more likely they are to contain an error. So we're making great progress. We've cleared the easy and the medium marks. Now, we might be running out of time about now. So before we get to tackling the machine costs, let's finish our decision-making activity, because there will be easier marks below it answering that question and giving the user of this document the advice. Let's now move to the bottom part of our spreadsheet, and we can now total up those costs for 80,000 units using the sum function. Okay, this is about the only function in constructed response workspace that you'll need. And if we use relative cell addresses, we can just copy, paste that equation into the screens column, saving us a ton of time. Now that we have the total for 80,000 units, we can divide that total by 80,000 to get to the unit level. Again, we're using basic spreadsheet operators, just dividing and relative cell addresses, copy pasting that equation to save time. Now, let's just plug in the outsource cost that was given directly to us in the scenario into both columns. Using the spreadsheet, we can then get the difference. You guys, at this point, we see that the in-house cost per unit is lower than the outsource cost, so we could go ahead and answer that question. Therefore, Robert should manufacture both components in-house. Now, remember, own figure rule. Okay, if you have a mistake in your answer or you leave something blank because you're out of time, okay, the markers will not punish you twice for a mistake. So these totals, even though they're not correct, you'll get full marks for everything that you have done to this point. Now we need to deal with this complicated, the most difficult part of the question, the machine costs. Okay, so we're going to use the workings approach. We're going to label our workings. Remember, there's a human being, a marker at the other end of this document, and they need to follow along with what you're doing. Okay, so we're going to use that working in a moment to show the marker, okay, what we are doing on the side. So the fixed costs are given to us directly. So all we have to do is plug those numbers in. Okay. So the total cost minus that fixed component would give us the variable cost. However, we have to reverse engineer the activity-based costing here. Too complicated to do in one big equation. So let's make a working so the marker can follow along and it will be easier for them to give us the partial marks if we make a slight mistake. Okay, so again, we're going to work in two columns, one column for keypads, one column for screens. And we got three things to do here. First thing that we need to do, okay, is get the current number of batches that are being produced. After we calculate that, we can get the current cost of producing a batch. Okay, now we can get the new number of batches because we're going to start manufacturing in quantities of 400. So we'll be producing more batches. And finally, we will then multiply the new number of batches, okay, by that cost per batch to get a new total variable cost. So we are producing 80,000 units of each component, and we're producing in batches of 500. So the current number of batches will simply be 80,000 divided by 500. And I'm still working in thousands here, guys. So the cost per batch now, let us get the variable component of that total cost. So we're going to get that total cost of 26, subtracting the fixed cost, and divide that, okay, by the current number of batches to get the cost per batch. Okay, we're working in thousands, so that's actually 137.5. And we can use the same approach in the next column, simply subtracting the fixed component from the total cost to get the variable cost, dividing by the number of batches. Okay, so the new number of batches, guys, is going to be 80,000 divided by 400. And I can use copy-paste to save a lot of time. Let's copy the same formula in there, just changing one variable. Then I can copy that formula right to the next column, cruising along at light speed using the spreadsheet tools. So the new variable cost will then be the new number of batches, cell F11, times that cost per batch, giving us 27,500. Copy that formula into the next cell, and we are done with that working, ladies and gentlemen. I can't stress the importance of following the rule easy marks first enough. Remember, I didn't take this question sequentially. I did the easy things first, then the medium things, and then I answered the question that was asked, even if I left out a difficult part of the question. I'd still get a comfortable pass, even if I hadn't completed working one. Okay, but to make it perfect for this demo, let's now just use the power of the spreadsheet to link the cells in our costing directly to the working using the relative addressing. Okay, and look at that. Our total was updated, our in-house cost was updated, and this does not change our final decision. If for some reason the totals changed and the in-house costs were higher, I would quickly change that final sentence. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's just do a little final polishing. Remember, there are no marks for formatting or spreadsheet skills. Keep your formulas as simple as possible. So just to polish this up, we're going to tell the marker the top part of the spreadsheet is in dollars, and we're working in thousands. We'll use a little bit of formatting just to improve the usability and navigation of this document. We're not getting any marks for this. Okay, and ladies and gentlemen, we are just about done. We've got a beautiful spreadsheet here, completed in the time management required. Created a nice, clean, easy to follow spreadsheet so the marker can go through and give you guys the marks that you need to pass. Thanks for watching, everybody.